Gentlemen, ghouls and fiends, and welcome to another edition of the Ministry of Horror. I'm your host, Tezz, and I am holding up to the camera a very, very, very slowly, very partially painted ultramarine company hero. It's probably fortunate that holding it up close means that it goes all blurry, because I'm not the neatest painter. I've done an initial base layer. I've done initial base spray coating. I've then done a couple of coats of the blue. Generally, the blue's all right. I think the only little minor detail that looks pretty good so far at the moment, or good by my standards, is the white skull and the gold crest thing that's on the back. I don't know the terminology. Got a long way to go. I tend to find I do my painting in half-hour pockets once or twice a week. One is because of time, with work, planning a wedding, everything else that goes on with it. And two, also, I tend to sit very hunched over when I'm painting, which probably isn't good, because then when I go to take a break, I end up thinking, actually, I probably could do with just stopping there and not giving myself herniated discs or anything like that. But I'm having fun with it. I'm having fun with that. I'm having fun with Space Marines 2. Played a bit more of that this week. Just dropping in, doing the odd mission here and there. It's a good laugh. How is everyone? I hope everyone's having a good time. Had a good week. We are live once again on twitch.tv/Tezzius, Tezzrus. Be sure to give the channel a follow. We do seem to keep getting the odd follow here and there, which is great. We are very, 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 very slowly, but most importantly, making progression towards 100 followers on Twitch. Now, it's entirely plausible that we may well have hit that target a long time ago, prior to switching the shows to recorded, prior to focusing more so on YouTube. But you know what? I think it's more fun to do a stream every once in a while rather than every week, and it being quite a commitment on the time. But I'm looking forward to this one. I'm looking forward to doing a show live. We're gonna do. We've only got one review. I should mention now. We've only got one review on today's show. This week for horror, for me, in terms of at-home releases, has very much been one of those weeks where when I get an opportunity to watch a horror film and I think, okay, now it's not too late in the evening, I'm still kind of awake, let's find a horror film. And the only kind of new things that are shown on like Prime or Sky or Netflix have got like 3 out of 10 on IMDb, and it's like, well, that's just, let's kind of go with the assumption that this is going to be a bag of dicks, and let's just save ourselves the hassle and not watch it. I really had meant to watch and review for this week Red Room, or the Red Room, or Red Rooms. I have got the BFI player on a they do on Prime, it's like a 14-day or a 20-day something free trial. So I'd got the free trial to watch Nosferatu, the vampire, the 70s Werner Herzog remake. And I saw that it's like $6.99 a month. Okay, well, I'm not going to keep it. I'll just do the free trial. But then the free trial was like 14 days or 21 days, something like that. It's really, really good. They've got some great looking things on there. Some distinguished cinema on the BFI player. And so I saw Red Rooms, and I thought, I've heard this is meant to be a pretty good film. Like, it's had a fair amount of praise. Stuck it on. Okay, it's in French. I think it's French-Canadian. Okay, so I'm going to have to be locked in and paying attention, watching subtitles. Very difficult to do with 3 dogs. So I normally, if I want to watch a film and relax, I'll watch a film downstairs in the living room. Watching films with subtitles on with the dogs, when they all just wanted to jump on you, it's it's a bit difficult. And it's also the opening, I will say, because I've only watched maybe 20 minutes or so. It's also very slow in terms of build up. Now, I'm not saying the film itself is slow, but in terms of when you've got like a limited window of an evening to watch a film, you put it on and go, oh shit, this is over 2 hours long. I'm going to have to be locked into focus and subtitles. And then it's this opening setting in a kind of a Canadian courtroom, where it's essentially one long continuous shot, which is slowly focusing on one person talking, and then it's panning and focusing elsewhere, but it's one fairly long scene without any cuts. I kind of felt that I need to be in the mood to watch this, and it hasn't happened this week. There's been a couple of moments where I thought, oh, okay, let's give it a go. But yeah, I need to be locked in. I need to probably watch it up here, really, in the Ministry of Horror HQ, the office. But hasn't happened. So we have got one film to review, though, which is Mind, Body, Spirit, which is the yoga horror that's currently on Shudder. We're going to be reviewing that a bit later on. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have a little look at the films that have been announced so far for 2025. We're not going to do all of them, but what we are going to do is we're going to switch to Wikipedia on the stream and have a little scan through. The list is in alphabetical order, so we'll kind of just scan and cherry pick a handful that grab our attention. So if you are watching live on twitch.tv/Tezz in the chat, if anything pops out at you, mention it. We'll have a little look at it. We'll have a chat with it. And then after the show, depending on if I have any energy, we will do a watch along. So obviously watch parties are the thing of the past, because it's Twitch and Amazon, whatever, getting rid of them. Boo. But we did a watch along, just basically sync up. I'm going to say when I'm hitting play. I'll mention in the opening few minutes what my timestamp is, and then people can sync up if they want, or if not, there's always a delay when it comes to streaming anyway. It's not the end of the world if I'm a couple of minutes behind or ahead of you guys. It's all good. But we're going to get to that a little bit later on. In terms of kind of updates, I managed to jump back into a little bit of Silent Hill 2 very briefly this week. Again, it was one of those situations where I turned it on, forgot that I'd gotten to the prison section, which is just pitch black everywhere. Like, Silent Hill's a dark game, but this was just like, I'm just in darkness surrounded by terrifying sounds. Wasn't in the mood. So my gaming-wise has been Space Marines 2 as and when, or Football Manager 24. I still love that game. Love all those Football Manager games, and a lot of reading. So I did a little TikTok today of my to be read pile of books, which you can sort of see some of them behind me live on the stream. Probably not clear enough to see the detail, but it's pretty chunky. It's a pretty chunky selection of books there, and I can't remember what the name of the book is that I've currently started, but I have also put to one side Song of Susanna, which is book 6 of the Dark Tower series. Part of me almost wants to pause the book I'm currently reading. It's called like State of Decay or House of Unending Decay or something like that. It's got a rat on the front. Part of me does kind of want to park that and just continue on my journey towards the Dark Tower. But I do think it's probably good to have a bit of a palate cleanser in between. This book that I'm currently reading is about 200 to 300 pages. Song of Susanna is 600 plus. It's not as big as Wolves of the Calla, but it's still, in comparison, so it's a chunky book. But one of the books that is in my pile, I don't know if moving the microphone will create a whole lot of banging sounds. I'm sure it does, so I apologize straight away. We do have the Horus Rising book. So I have previously mentioned, I think in Discord, the Horus Heresy book, and was rightly lambasted. Not lambasted, it was very, very jovial, that the Horus Heresy book is like tens of whatever, hundreds of books, whatever. And this is just Horus Rising, as far as I'm aware, is the first one. So that's a Warhammer book. That's been in my basket for so long after hearing about it ages ago when I first did the Warhammer video where I did a bit of painting. And I heard that was where I should check it out. Never got around to it, but now that I've actually started doing some Warhammer painting with the idea to eventually play Warhammer, figured to give it a go to get into a bit more of the lore. I've, Sethi, Fran in the Discord, Ministry of Horror Discord, given me information here and there about the different charters, what to look out for, and I've watched a couple of videos. It's still a very info dump heavy in terms of me actually taking in who these different factions are and the whole legacy. I also have Mistborn, because I've always heard if you want to get into modern fantasy, Brandon Sanderson's where it's at. Haven't started that yet. And then I've got a few books now on folklore. I've got A Treasury of British Folklore. I've got Damnable Tales, a folk horror anthology. I've also got a very fancy hardback book by Neil Phillip called The Watkins Book of English Folk Tales. English Folk Tales. Yeah. Other books. Pay the Piper, George A. Romero, Scuttle. Don't know who wrote that. Stephen King's Salem's Lot. Because after watching Salem's Lot in the cinema, I just wanted to reread the book. And my old copy of it was tattered to fuck. Ray Bradbury, Dark Carnival. Looking forward to that one. My sister got me The Fisherman, which I've heard is very creepy. The Night of Baba Yaga. And then over on the other side, we've got Fire and Blood, George R.R. Martin. We've got another Chris Carter book. Now, currently, I'm putting that to one side because that is book 13 of Chris Carter's Hunter, whatever his name is. Not Mike Hunter. Chris Carter's thriller series. I'm currently listening to, on the Audible, book 4 or 5. Maybe 5, I'm not sure. But they're good. You know what you're getting with each one. They're good. And I've got a whole ton of Jeffrey Deaver Bone Collector books and Harlan Corbin books as well. It's ridiculous. The to be read book list is ridiculous. But I did make a solemn promise. Well, it wasn't so much a promise, it was a declaration. I wasn't advised to do this, but she agreed it was a good idea. I said to my fiance that for this year, I'm not buying any new books, unless it's something like a new Stephen King book, so I always get his books at release now. I'm not buying any new books this year until I have read my to-be-read pile. And there's going to be books that I start and I go, yeah, do you know what? That isn't actually that good. And I don't think there's anything wrong with stopping a book. I think it's worth giving a book a fair crack. I think you should really probably try and give a book at least a third of its length. Because if a book is 300 pages and within the first 100 pages you're not liking it, I think that's fine. And people might think, well, 100 pages isn't really that much. Yeah, but if you're looking at a book that's 1,000 pages long, like something like that, and you've read 300 pages, you've already done a bit of a commitment to it. And if after that much reading of a book, you're not enjoying it, I think, just give it up. I did that with, I don't often give up on books, but I did that with The Ember Blade. I didn't think it was that well written. And Grady Hendrix's Final Girl support group. I was quite surprised how I just really wasn't connecting with it and finding it that interesting. I thought, okay, this is an author he's quite kitsch. He's got some style to him. To them, I don't know. But it just wasn't clicking with me. I ended up giving up on it. I just thought it went from scenario to scenario with no sort of realm of, how is this set in any form of reality? I like the setting was decent, the characters and not so much. Anyway, we need to start off with the horror news. We've got Eddie in the chat, we've got Fran in the chat. How's it going, guys? I don't think any of the other sound effects are working, but I think the news music is still working, so let's give that a go. Sorry, I stupidly. Oh, there we go. Friday the 13th back.
This is God.
I stupidly chose the wrong moment to have a sip of my drink. Let's do a take two. This is the news. Ho, ho, ho. There we go. Fran in the chat says, my to be read pile is hideous. Like films, some books you need to be in the right state of mind to get into. Some books I've left and later on it's just clicked. Yeah, I mean, I had that. I think my most recent example that I've mentioned on the show before has been Wizard and Glass, The Dark Tower, book 4. I was actively disliking it for a long time, but felt, you know, I really should kind of get through it. You know, I can't just go this long and not got through the Dark Tower series. And I am glad I persevered because it got so much better. And maybe I won't mind the opening half of it so much if I go back to it at some point. So yeah, I guess you just need to sort of pick and choose, because there are going to be books like... I remember getting the Audible for The Summer I Died, because I'd heard, oh, that's a really messed up horror book and blah, blah, blah. And I had an Audible token, and, you know, why spend money if you've got that available? And I just thought, like, there's this whole blurb about the author beforehand where it sounded like, well, he's written this himself, bigging himself up, saying, oh, he's a mainstay of the LA scene and blah, 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 and started a band and was, you know, eponymous with all that. It was basically just blowing smoke up his own arse. And the writing in it was just like, I'm no, you know, scholarly expert. I've not written, you know, novels that have been published or anything like that. So I'm no expert, but I can speak from reading and my enjoyment of reading. And I just thought, I can't stick with this. And also, if its only selling point is it's really grim and grotesque and messed up, then one, that doesn't interest me that much. And two, if the writing is dog shit, then why would I stick with dog shit writing because it's going to be disgusting? It's like there's nothing there. There's no substance. So yeah, I gave up on that pretty quickly. But anyway, it's news time, and we have to start off with some sad news. It was a bit of a shock to me yesterday. I was catching up on Wednesday's episode of The Traitors, the BBC show. I do enjoy it. You know, it's. I also enjoy the Australian one, which initially I thought, oh god, I hate all these people, but it had a brilliant finale, and the Faithfuls in the Australian season 2 are absolutely awful. But we were watching the Traitors, and then my phone got a notification, and it said, Mulholland Drive director David Lynch has passed away. And man, I knew he had recently announced emphysema. He's now got emphysema, and he is, you know, he was just shy of 79. But man, that sucks. That sucks. We did a show on David Lynch a while ago, talking about Twin Peaks, talking about Mulholland Drive, Eraserhead. You know, I haven't seen all of his films. There's, you know, I think the ones that I own that I haven't got around to watching are Dune. I've seen bits of Dune, and it wasn't really for me. And Inland Empire, I've not seen, but I thought Wild at Heart was really good. I thought Blue Velvet was very good. I thought Mulholland Drive is incredible. Elephant Man's brilliant. Eraserhead is weird, but it's quite an experience. And Wild at Heart I thought was pretty good, actually. I did quite enjoy that. And also, I suppose, what's the Bill Pullman one? The title of it escapes me. I eventually got around to watching that. I had no idea what was going on, as I don't with a lot of his features, but did thoroughly enjoy it. Lost Highway, strange film, but it just sort of there's just this dreamlike nightmare to his films, and we've lost a really unique voice in the world of cinema. So yeah, David Lynch has passed away. I think this weekend we've got a very busy weekend with wedding stuff, chores, and tidying up and stuff. But I think I'm going to try and make some time to watch a David Lynch film. And I have seen that HMV have got Mulholland Drive in their 4K special offer on 4K films. So I have that to make sure to get a copy of that because I have got a DVD copy, but it's such a gorgeous film. I want to watch it in 4K. So, yeah, very sad news about David Lynch. Very, very sad. So, as with all of our horror news, this all comes from bloodydisgusting.com. Be sure to check them out for news, reviews, editorials. Check them out on X, other places. There isn't a list of new horror films this week, so that probably ties in with my struggles to watch a new horror film on streaming platforms. I don't think much has been coming to Shudder because Shudder on the Prime app is now back in that state of not having a new film section, new releases section. Because normally when you go on there, you've got your new releases at the top, then popular releases, horror, thriller, TV series, whatever, documentaries. But if nothing new has been hitting for a couple of weeks, then there is no new releases section. And yeah, there's just nothing else really on Prime, and Sky hasn't really got any new horror, and Netflix rarely has new horror. So yeah, it's a quiet week at the moment, which sucks. But Opus posters spotlight the star-studded cast of A24's Event of the Century. This write-up comes from John Squires. A24 promises us this week that the trailer for their new horror movie Opus will be making its way online on Tuesday, January 21st, and today they're previewing the Event of the Century with a series of 8 character posters that spotlight the main cast. Find them below. Io Edebiri and John Malkovich star alongside Amber Midthunder and Juliette Lewis, Murray Bartlett, Stephanie Suganami, Young Mazzino, and Tony Hale. A24 will release Opus in theatres on March 14th, 2025. From writer-director Mark Anthony Green, the upcoming film will be A24's first new horror movie to release here in 2025. The film has been described as flashy pop horror, as well as a tense psychosocial game of cat and mouse. In A24's Opus, a young writer is invited to the remote compound of a legendary pop star who mysteriously disappeared 30 years ago. Surrounded by the star's cult of sycophants and intoxicated journalists, she finds herself in the middle of his twisted plan. I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued. Like A24 for a minute had that kind of prestige when it comes to, I suppose you could say, high-end horror. It really had a shine to it for a couple of years, and I don't necessarily think that shine has gone anywhere. Like not everything has been a huge hit, but there's been a lot of things that I've seen from A24 that I've loved. Hereditary, Midsommar, Talk to Me. Bodies, I thought was okay. I didn't think it was amazing, but it was okay. But in the last year, I think Neon have really kind of risen up in terms of my fandom and sort of taken more of my attention when it comes to a new release than A24. I'm going to be interested to see this. I think it has got a very promising sounding cast. Tony Hale, I just think of Arrested Development, he's brilliant in that. The setup sounds pretty interesting. You got to enjoy a cult aspect of a film, especially when it's in a remote compound. You know, it's always going to go terribly, isn't it? Let's be honest. Let's move on. Fran in the chat, I think the main new release is Wolfman in the cinema. Yeah, I'm probably going to try and go watch that next week. I know it's out now, but I would prefer to use the Odeon Amazon 2 for a tenner and only spend £5 on a ticket, then spend full whack. Just because the trailers look like it could be good, but I'm not that sold on modern Universal monster films in terms of in that pantheon. I'm going to exclude Nosferatu, which I think is Universal, because that's, Count Orlok isn't, a Universal monster like the Wolfman or Dracula or Creature in the Black Lagoon and all that stuff. So whilst the Invisible Man did very well, and I thought it was decent, I wasn't blown away by it. I wasn't bowled over by it. I've certainly I thought it was decent, but I've never really thought about giving it a rewatch. It's just never really sort of crossed my mind, and that could be because I haven't really seen it on streaming platforms and gone, oh yeah, give that another go. I don't own it, so yeah, Wolfman I will try and watch next week to review for the next show, but I'm not rushing out to spend money on it. Let's put it like that. Next up in gaming news, maintain your sanity while tending a lighthouse in the Lovecraftian Little Lighthouse of Horror. Write-ups from Mike Wilson. More Lovecraftian horror gaming is coming your way thanks to indie incubator, Level Up Games studio and publisher Troglobites Games with their atmospheric 2D psychological horror game Little Lighthouse of Horror. Set to drive you insane on PC via Steam on January 28th, Little Lighthouse of Horror draws inspiration from the haunting legend of the Flannan Isles, casting you as the role of Lawrence, the unlucky lighthouse keeper chosen to take over after the last caretaker vanished. In Little Lighthouse of Horror, the players must navigate the delicate balance of maintaining the lighthouse light lit while facing the psychological toll of isolation, as well as traditional survival mechanics such as hunger and tiredness. You must carefully manage limited supplies like food, oil, and spare parts, using the flag system wisely to call for necessary supplies. Keep your sanity in check as you face each strange occurrence. Your actions, or inaction, can either anchor Lawrence or let him drift into insanity. Throughout the game, you must uncover the dark secrets that the lighthouse harbours. With each decision affects your fate, leading to multiple endings. Every choice matters, creating a unique narrative journey with several outcomes based on player decisions, in a short yet highly replayable experience. So I'm going to have a quick look at the trailer. It does kind of have Game Boy graphics in terms of 2D. Would this be like 8-bit, maybe? I don't actually know what the bits are on an original Game Boy. But it's got that kind of color palette as well. And yeah, it very much does look like a Game Boy game. Isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I suppose it's not the sort of thing that I really play these days. I think it's something that could work on Switch, but I rarely pick up my Switch either these days. So yeah, probably not one I'm going to play, to be honest. Next up, Journeys to Hell with As Above, So Below on Blu-ray from Australia's Via Vision. Right up from Alex DiVincenzo. Australia's Via Vision Entertainment will release As Above, So Below on limited edition Blu-ray with new extras on March 26th. The 2014 found footage movie is packaged in a 3D lenticular hard case with 6 art cards, hand numbered out of 2,000. It costs $27.89. Shot on location in the catacombs of Paris, John Eric Dowdall directs from a script he co-wrote with brother Drew Dowdall. There's special features of audio commentary, shooting underground interview, beyond the catacombs interview, video essay by Dread Central. As Above, So Below is one of those found footage films that so easily could have passed me by. It came out around a time where found footage was having its boom. We had like what would have been the big found footage? I mean, there was VHS at this time, obviously Blair Witch quite a few years prior. Paranormal Activity was probably the one that restarted the boom. We bring the boom. And yeah, Chernobyl Diaries I thought was all right. It got creepy near the end, but it wasn't amazing. And As Above, So Below, I thought, oh god, it's gonna be another one of these like rip-off found footage films where there's not really much going on, but maybe a couple of shaky scenes. It's pretty good, actually. And I think what they managed to achieve with the effects in this, where I suppose up to this point, I hadn't really seen that many found footage films with special effects, visual effects, digital effects. And when I say digital effects, I don't just mean the sort of digital tape damage when the camera's been dropped and all that kind of shit, or interference because there's a ghost there. No, nothing like that. More so in terms of there's moments where their sanity is being tested. I'm sure that there's a moment where there's like a car which is underground and the car disappears or something along those lines. It's been a little while since I've seen it, but it's pretty good actually. It's certainly much better than I'd expected it to be. Yeah, oh, and I've noticed as well it's got Jonah in it from Superstore. I wondered why I recognised him from when I first saw Superstore. Anyway, that has now come to Australia via Vision. Decent film. If you haven't seen it, if you do like found footage, I would definitely recommend giving it a watch. I mean, found footage is one of those subgenres where there's a fair amount of guff out there, I guess, with any subgenre of horror. But this is one that could slip you by. I'd make sure to check it out. Next up, The Rule of Jenny Penn. One of Stephen King's favourite recent horror movies comes to theatres. John Squire writes, praised by Stephen King last September as one of the best horror movies he saw last year, Shudder and IFC Films' The Rule of Jenny Penn finally has a release date here in early 2025. The Rule of Jenny Penn is coming to theatres on March 7th. The film will make its at-home debut on Shudder at a later date this year. In the meantime, there is an official poster. Stephen King summed up the movie in his own words last year by saying, Jeffrey Rush stars with John Lithgow as a geriatric psychopath with an evil hand puppet. In the film, a former judge goes toe-to-toe with an elderly psychopath who is using a hand puppet to terrorise the residents at an assisted living facility. Directed by James Ashcroft and co-written by Eli Kent and Ashcroft, this year's The Rule of Jenny Penn follows Ashcroft's acclaimed feature debut, Coming Home in the Dark. I think I've heard of Coming Home in the Dark in terms of scanning through films to watch and haven't actually clicked on it. So maybe it's one I need to check out. Catherine Fitzgerald and Orlando Stewart produced the film, executive produced by Ashcroft, Eli Kent, John Lithgow, Jeffrey Rush, Emily Gotto, Nicholas Laszlo, and Samuel Zimmerman. I mean, if Stephen King likes it, I'm going to have to give it a go. And John Lithgow is brilliant. I mean, my experience with John Lithgow had generally, for a long time, purely been Third Rock from the Sun. And I'm sure I saw Harriet and the Hendersons, but I don't really remember. I think it's one of those films that would be on and I'd catch a moment of it. And I know he has done a horror film, which I think at one point I owned on Blu-ray, called Raising Cain, which didn't really do it. I wasn't that interested actually in it. I watched it thinking, okay, I think it was an Arrow release. I'm sure I'd caught bits of it on TV before and thought, this seems pretty interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't think it was that good. But if there are any doubts about John Lithgow's horror chops, season 4 of Dexter, one of the best seasons of kind of horror TV. My favourite of Dexter by a country mile. I remember series 1 Dexter was really good. Season 2 is very good. And I remember series 3 being like, oh, it's okay. It's not that great. But then season 4 was just like, it was a next level of horror because we hadn't really seen that side of the serial killers. Like obviously there's Dexter, there's a serial killer technically. But we mainly followed him. We hadn't really properly followed the exploits from memory. I could be misremembering here, but it just felt like it was a next level of creepiness that just hadn't been shown in that show before, and arguably not since. I definitely want to check out. So Fran says, Captain Barbosa versus the Trinity Killer in an OAP home. Trailer looks quite creepy. I haven't actually seen the trailer. I'll have to make a note of that to check that out. Maybe watch that on the watch along. I'll keep that tab open because I will forget. And then finally, in the horror news, Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare extends its theatrical flight for another week. Alex DiVincenzo writes, Following an initial 3-day engagement that kicked off on Monday, Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare is extending its theatrical run with 75 different locations across the country. From Jagged Edge Productions and ITN Studios, the newest entry in the Pooniverse will continue its flight on the big screen until January 23rd. Tickets are available through Iconic Events. The twisted take on the childhood classic is written and directed by Scott Chambers, who produced the Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey films, in addition to starring in the second installment as Christopher Robin. Does that mean that they recast Christopher Robin? Because the first guy was the first Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey film. I didn't like it. We know that, but the guy that played Christopher Robin was especially shit. So I'm guessing he was recast in the sequel, which is probably a wise decision. Anyway, in the British indie slasher, Wendy Darling strikes out in an attempt to rescue her brother Michael from the clutches of the evil Peter Pan, who intends to send him to Neverland. Along the way, she meets a twisted Tinkerbell who's hooked on what she thinks is fairy dust. It stars Megan Placideus as Wendy Darling, Martin Portlock as Peter Pan, Kit Green as Tinkerbell, and Charity Case as Hook, along with Peter de Souza Fione, Kirsten Waring, and Nicholas Woodson. Now, I will admit that when the trailer for this dropped, I thought, okay, this actually looks kind of creepy. Out of the Pooniverse films that had been announced and released, this was the first one that I thought, okay, maybe it's not actually terrible. So I'll keep an eye out for when this drops in the UK. I can't imagine we're going to get a cinematic run over here, especially if it was initially just going to be, like a 3-day event in the States. But it will probably come to Amazon, if not Tubi. Tubi's actually probably a good shout for it. I'm going to keep an eye out for that one. Anyway, Ghouls and Fiends, that is it for the horror news. That was the news. Oh, oh, oh. There we go. Eddie the Beast in the chat. Tezz's favourite is Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. Absolutely not. Anyway, we'll now get to the one solitary review. And that is the Shudder release, Mind, Body, Spirit. Now, typically with a newer film, doesn't appear to have a Wikipedia page, so I'm limited on the information available and have to go purely on my memory, which is not great, to discuss elements of this film. So, as with all our reviews, we will talk a little bit about the plot of the film without going into heavy spoilers, talk about the people behind it, the highs, the lows, and I'll give you a score out of 10. And I should also say, this is just purely my opinion. If you disagree, that's cool. Let's have a discussion. We have a X account, Ministry_Horror. We have a TikTok account, Ministry of Horror. We now have an Instagram account, Ministry of Horror. Be sure to check it out. You'll see the regular logo. I will get better at posting on there. It's fairly new, but I have put on my reel of my to be read pile, which has had a few likes, which is nice. So, an aspiring yoga influencer embarks on a ritual practice left behind by her estranged grandmother. That's all we've got to go on the blurb on IMDb. But essentially, the film is, I can't remember the term used when it comes to found footage, but it's a streaming, the streaming type. I remember when we reviewed Deadstream, it had mentioned, and maybe I should just look up Deadstream, which is a film I would like to rewatch at some point. I had a great time with that. I might actually see if it's available on Amazon. Support physical media, Ghouls and Fiends. Support physical media. Deadstream has got a Blu-ray release, but it is an import. Boo hiss. I don't have anything that will play that. Talking about boo hiss, Amazon did me dirty. I'd ordered the 4K Steelbook for 7. All excited for it to arrive this week. Got a notification, delivered, and put through your letterbox. Has it? Fuck. No, it hasn't. Considering I'd got the notification that it left the depot to be out for delivery, and we don't have a depot near us. And within 20 minutes, it was marked as it's been delivered through your mailbox. No, it hasn't. So that pissed me off quite a bit. So I've had to request a refund because, yeah, I just wanted my Steelbook of 7. So anyway, now I'm getting distracted by Amazon's shoddy service. Right. So Deadstream, supernatural horror comedy, haunted house, found footage format. Yeah, there was a term used in what's Francis in the chat? Influencer. Okay, so I'm on the killer monsters spirit side. Oh yeah, influencer is a good shout. No, there was a term used for. I'm gonna have to Google it because it's gonna piss me off. Term used for found footage streaming films. Screen Life films. No. Oh, Screen Life apparently is how it's. I don't think that's the term that I'd read, but I now can't. Yeah, I'm going to end up getting so distracted. So, Mind, Body, Spirit. The format of this is a woman is recording herself, so it's essentially found footage. So she isn't actually technically streaming, because the idea, and this kind of comes out through dialogue, is she wants to kind of be a content creator doing like yoga and, wellness and promoting, like a healthy living and healthy spirit and that kind of stuff. Shouldn't be so disparaging. She hasn't posted anything online. She has a friend or a family friend, or I don't know if it's her sister, who comes over, who has a bit of a following, and they're quite different personalities, and they're kind of clashing a bit. She's not really looking after herself, and there seems to be some sort of presence in the house, and the house that she's in is her late grandmother, her late estranged grandmother. So that's pretty much all you really need to know. And esteemed horror fans, that's kind of enough to pick up what may be going on from there. Why was the grandmother estranged? What weird things could be going on in an empty house? Well, okay, you can probably put 2 and 2 together and work things out from there. Performances, fine. I mean, the lead, Sarah J. Bartholomew, I'm not familiar with them, but they do a pretty good job of anchoring the whole film. You do feel her plight as she is just trying to get a start in this world, while also starting to question things that are going on around her and if what she's seeing is real, as her sanity starts to get played with a bit. It is more on the psychological horror aspect. There is a moment with a bit of bloody violence, but it is off screen, so it is more the sound design that lets you know what horrendous thing is occurring. Music is kind of nondescript. I mean, with found footage films, you more often than not don't have a strong score. This one's more, well, a wailing violin or droning sound just to create some tension. That's really it when it comes to the score for this. It's fine, but it's pretty shallow. There isn't too much kind of going on in this one. So for that, I can only really give it 5.5 out of 10. It's, an hour 20, an hour 25. It's not bad. I've seen much worse. It's just fairly empty. and it doesn't do anything that would surprise you. I mean, there is a particular moment which I guess is maybe trying to hearken to the body manipulation of the only notable scene of the Suspiria remake, which part of me does think maybe I need to give that another go, but I really disliked it when I watched it. I'm a huge fan of the original. I've never got a problem with films, being remade, because the original's not going anywhere. But I remember that, just thinking that was just such a missed opportunity. I thought it was quite dull. I thought it was quite drawn out. But there is a particular moment with a witch attack on a woman in a separate dance studio, where her body is being contorted based on a dance being performed in an adjacent studio. There's a sort of moment like that in this, but not that elaborate, more so just what's happening to the body. That's kind of it, really. But 5.5 out of 10 is for Mind, Body, Spirit. So, what we are now going to do is we're going to go to Wikipedia. Now, Wikipedia, I've loaded up the list of horror films of 2025. There's going to be things in here which, we don't know when it's coming out in 2025. Maybe it's been announced. Maybe it has an official release date penned in. But we're going to have a little kind of scroll through and talk about ones that I'm hyped about, I have never really noticed, or maybe I'm a bit intrigued about. And just sort of like, if there is information when it's coming out, do a little preview on that. We'll move on to other ones. And we'll just cherry pick a few, because it's quite a long list in alphabetical order. But I'm sure that there's certainly going to be a few that grab our attention. Now, ones like further on down here, VHS 8, Untitled Silent Night, Deadly Night film, where it's all TBA. Not much point talking about those, because, who knows when that's going to be released and what kind of context we have there. And right down here at the bottom, Wolfman, we have briefly kind of mentioned that is the one that's just come out this week. Yeah, I'm kind of intrigued, but I am seeing the initial headlines for the early reviews that it's not got much bite. It looks nice, but there isn't that much going on in it, which I guess was a bit of a fear from the trailers. It looked like it could be decent, but it also looked like, is this quite an isolated film and we're just going to be stuck in one location, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not necessarily going to lend itself to anything interesting. So 28 years later is one that I am for sure looking forward to. That is scheduled to come out 20th of June 2025, and I must say I do need to at some point rewatch 28 Weeks Later. So me and my fiance Vix watched 28 Days Later again fairly recently. It might have actually turned out to be a first-time view for her, because she'd commented that it seemed a lot more dark and depressing and visceral than she remembered. And in chatting, I think she may well have only actually seen 28 Weeks Later, quite possibly, because that, to me, when I first saw it, it felt like the Hollywood version of things. I need to give it a rewatch, to be fair. It's been a very long time. I haven't seen it since it came out. But 28 Days Later is quality. Visually, it hasn't aged that well. It was one of the early films released that had been shot digitally, as opposed to on film. And as such, it does in quite a few places look fairly low budget, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But if you've never seen 28 Days Later, you've seen the trailer for 28 Years Later, and maybe you've seen 28 Weeks Later. And now that 28 Days Later is more readily available again on digital, because it's been kind of just not available for a long time. Yeah, it's only a 2002 film, so it's not old, by any stretch of the means. But just beware that it doesn't have that same polish as some other films from that era in terms of visually. So 28 years later, upcoming post-apocalyptic horror film starring Jodie Comer, Aaron Taylor Johnson, and Ralph Fiennes. Now, apparently, it's been confirmed that Cillian Murphy, supposedly, whether this is a red herring, isn't in 28 years later, but will be in the sequel, 28 years later, The Bone Temple. Now, I guess that would make sense because Cillian Murphy's name hasn't been in this marketing, and it has been confirmed supposedly that the emaciated rage zombie man who looks incredibly like Cillian Murphy isn't Cillian Murphy. But set up for this one, 28 years after the rage virus escaped a medical research laboratory, survivors have found ways to exist amidst the infected. One group lives on a small island connected to the mainland by a single heavily defended causeway. When a father and his son leave the island on a mission into the dark heart of the mainland, they discover secrets, wonders, and horrors of the outside world. I think the trailer for this does look excellent. It very, very, very much it very, very much looks like it could well be an exceptional entry into the series and really, really kind of reignite the hype in the series that's kind of been dormant for almost 20 years. Fran, the chat says, this has potential to be great. I remember liking Sunshine by Danny Boyle a lot more than most people. I enjoyed Sunshine, but it's one of those films that I watched, thought was pretty good. But again, it didn't, on that viewing, whether I was just sort of there and not really fully engaged, it just didn't do enough to kind of stick with me. Like, if I think back to Sunshine, I enjoyed it, but I can't remember any particular scenes. So it could well be that I need to give it a rewatch. But nothing. I think the thing with that for me is it just no particular moments stayed with me. And Fran also says, could be a final scene or post-credits appearance by Cillian to set up Bone Temple. I would think you've got to have some sort of appearance. You've got to. If you've got Cillian Murphy returning, and he is listed here in the cast, even though I'm sure I saw a headline that he won't be appearing in 28 years later, but will star in the sequel, you've got to think he is going to be in this. Yeah, it hasn't got him listed there, but don't know. We'll see. It's TBA for A Quiet Place Part 3. Part of me thinks I need to rewatch the second one. I remember being a little bit deflated with the second film. I think it just, as I mentioned on the show before, it just felt like the ending was a bit abrupt. But A Quiet Place, day one, incredibly sad film, but it was pretty good. But it's a very, very touching story, quite tough to watch in places, just in terms of the context of the story. Bambi the Reckoning can get fucked. Clown in a Cornfield. Said that a bit like Brian Alvarez. Clown in a Cornfield. So I have, this is one of the audibles that I did give up on. Clown in a Cornfield is an upcoming American slasher horror film directed by Eli Craig and written by Carter Blanchard and Eli Craig. The film is based on the 2020 horror novel with the same name. It stars Katie Douglas, Kevin Durand, Will Sasso, Cassandra Potenza, and Aaron Abrams. Now, Aaron Abrams I'm not familiar with. Katie Douglas I'm not familiar with. Kevin Durand and Will Sasso, they're both very good. Kevin Durand I mainly associate with The Strain and also recently Abigail, who's very good in Abigail. And Will Sasso is one of those comedians. He's sort of more known these days, I think, for his impressions of wrestlers. He is very good. But I do remember him on a TV show from the early 2000s, Less Than Perfect. It was one of those TV shows that would be on TV in the day, and it was just, it's just nice background viewing. It wasn't particularly hilarious, but wasn't offensive or anything. And he was on there. And it's always just surprised me that he hasn't gone on to do more, because he's incredibly good at impersonations, and he's a funny guy. But Clown in the Cornfield, I know that there's 2 or 3 books, potentially going to be a 4th. I listened to a couple of hours of the Audible. Just found myself being quite bored with it. But I would be tempted to give the film a watch, and if the film was enjoyable, I'd go back to the Audible and give it another go. But it's scheduled for a wide release, May 9th, under RLJE Films and Shudder. So hopefully we get that in the UK without me needing to pay any extra money for it. Companion is one worth a chat. The trailer for this does look like it could be quite creepy, and I like the fact that with the trailer for Companion that I've seen the cinema prior to Heretic, and I don't think it was on prior to Nosferatu, but I'm sure there's been another film I've seen recently when this has been in the trailers, and it does look kind of interesting. But as I mentioned, it doesn't really give much away. It doesn't really make it clear exactly what is going on. I guess from that artwork, Sophie Thatcher is playing a robot, because there's a moment where her arm is on fire. But now looking at that artwork where her eyes are white, I am going to guess that she's a robot. And you can see here there isn't any kind of blurb on what the plot is for the film, but the trailer does look pretty creepy. And this comes out at the end of the month. 10 million budget, so it's quite low, really, on the budget scale. I'm going to be keeping an eye out for that one. Fran says, this looks like it's on the AI Megan trend. There's a newer trailer that shows off more. Oh, okay. I'm interested to watch that, so I'm probably going to try and avoid any more of like any more kind of trailers. I think I want to go into this kind of like I did with Strange Darling, like I did with Cuckoo, which, yeah, Cuckoo I don't think was... I think Cuckoo was a little bit disappointing, but Strange Darling blew me away, and I knew next to nothing going into that. Death of a Unicorn. We won't go into that one, but the trailer for that does look pretty good. Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega seem to work well together, and Will Poulter, you do forget how funny Will Poulter is, and I think he originally did come as a child actor from a comedy background. Even from his teens, like the We Are the Millers. So this does look like a bit of a return to that genre for him. It looks like it could be pretty interesting. Death of a Unicorn. I do like the trailer for that. Not familiar with Drop, but Christopher Landon, Megan Faye, dunno. Fear Street Prom Queen. Now, I've still not seen the third Fear Street film, and I've heard that's meant to be one of the best. But I know that the Fear Street book series, never read them. I was a Goosebumps kid. I don't really think we got... Fear Street might have been either before or after my time. I don't know. I think Fear Street must have come out after Goosebumps, and I was reading Stephen King after that point. But a lot of people love them. I enjoyed Fear Street Part 1 and 2. There wasn't a particular reason I didn't watch Part 3. I mean, it could be because of the period setting, and more often than not, I'm not that interested in period set films, which is mad because The Witch is brilliant, and you could say The Lighthouse is a period film. Technically, it is. Nosferatu is a period film. So really, my stance on not liking period pieces is absolute bullshit when you boil it down. Final Destination Bloodlines. Now, the Final Destination films are generally all pretty fun. Bloodlines is an upcoming supernatural horror film, the 6th installment in the series. I always felt that there was more. It's produced by New Line Cinema, scheduled for release May 16th. Now, this has got to be one of the final appearances of Tony Todd as William Bloodworth, so that's worth a watch just for Tony Todd, the legend. I kind of don't want to read any more on this. I like not knowing much about Final Destination. I think, in terms of the plot, I think in terms of the title being Bloodlines, you got to think that there's going to be some sort of connection back to an original cast member or the first couple, because Bloodlines normally has that association of it's a relative of someone that we've previously seen before. So definitely interested in that. Even though it's a TBA, Five Nights at Freddy's 2, I'm up for. when we reviewed this, it was one of those films that the concept of it, I thought the games don't really look like my sort of thing. They're just jump scare for jump scare's sake. I don't know anything about the lore. I watched the film just because it was like a freebie on Prime one week or Sky Cinema. I'm not sure. Really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. All the performances in it are really good. So I'm down for Five Nights at Freddy's 2. So Frankenstein. Now, Guillermo del Toro is one of those directors where I do enjoy his films and I like his unique aesthetic, but some aspects of it that are overtly just over the top in terms of CGI at times do sort of turn off my attention a bit. So whilst I do like Guillermo del Toro and I like the Cabinet of Curiosities, I thought that was very good, although of course that is different directors doing each episode. I don't think he's done a bad film, but sometimes not so much the visual aesthetic, but I suppose the use of effects just sort of turns my brain off a little bit when I don't want it to be. But it's a new take on Frankenstein for Netflix, so this isn't a Universal Monster Frankenstein. Oscar Isaac's brilliant. Jacob, I don't know who that is. Mia Goth. We're fans of Mia Goth here, of course. Lars Mikkelsen, don't know. David Bradley. Yeah. Charles Dance, Christopher Waltz. It's a good cast. Victor Frankenstein strives to restore life to the dead and succeeds in creating a horrific creature that doesn't have, from the looks of this, a set date other than 2025. So any point this year, apparently. Fran in the chat, I had no idea Del Toro had a film coming out. Some serious actors in this cast. Yeah, I think it's a pretty good cast there. Heart Eyes. Now, I haven't watched the trailer for this yet, but I've seen a bit of buzz about it, and I didn't realize it's a Josh Rubin film. So Heart Eyes looks like a pretty cool slasher from what I've heard about it. Josh Rubin, I enjoyed his film Scare Me. Scare Me was better than I was expecting based on the setup. Werewolves Within was pretty good. And he has also, what was the film he did that I thought was okay but outstayed its welcome? I don't think he directed it, but he's featured in it. Oh my goodness. Right, let's just go to his IMDb. That'll be quicker. But the main thing that I was going to mention with Josh Rubin was what is now Dropout, used to be College Humor. Where on earth is A Wounded Fawn? That was the film that I don't think he directed, but he featured in, and it was different. It was unique. It was different. I liked the aesthetic approach to it. And I thought the story was okay, but it did outstay its welcome a bit, and it sort of went through a few too many twists and turns here and there. But Josh Rubin, I remember mostly from College Humor, and which is now Dropout, and I think he's still featured on that. I don't watch Dropout. I believe Dropout's behind a paywall. That's completely fine if that's a way for it to continue, because I know at one point it was bankrupt, then that's great. But I pay for enough streaming services, so I don't watch Dropout. I know you can probably get clips on YouTube, but yeah. Either way, Josh Rubin is cool, and he was in a recent episode of the Creep Tapes, which Creep Tapes was all right. But co-workers working late on Valentine's Day are mistaken for a couple by the infamous Heart Eyes killer. So it's a serial killer with a mask that has heart eyes. I think that's pretty cool straight away. Cast Olivia Holt, Disney's kicking it. Don't know. Mason Gooding. Don't know. Don't think I know any of this cast except Devon Sawyer and Jordana Brewster. Was she in the first Final Destination? I'm not sure. She's been in some horror films, I know that. But Devon Sawyer, of course, is the first Final Destination. Idle Hands. Has been in a few things. So that is being released February 7th, 2025. Going to keep an eye out for that one, The Heart Eyes. Hell House LLC Lineage. Do we have a release date on this? Now, October 2025. Okay, that's smart. Release it at Halloween. It serves as the last and fifth installment of the Hell House LLC franchise. So the first film, I have said that there was so much hype around how good it is as a found footage film, and it didn't really click for me. And then I saw the prequel film that came out last year on Shudder, and I thought that was so good. It really connected well with me. Then I went back and watched the second film, and that was shit. I do still need to watch the third film, but I have heard I've heard mixed things. It's either worse than the second or it's slightly better than the second. So I haven't rushed out to watch it. Thank you, Eddie in the chat. She was in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the beginning. Of course she was. And another which I forget the name of. Brewster was in The Faculty as well. Oh, God, I love The Faculty. Faculty is excellent. The CGI right near the end, yes, doesn't look great. But it's got an amazing soundtrack, great performances. The Faculty is Invasion of the Body Snatchers at high school. King Spawn. Todd McFarlane, starring Jeremy Renner and Jamie Foxx. Now, Spawn is an odd property. We don't really have any proper details from the looks of this. I enjoyed what I saw of the HBO cartoon series. It was, I saw it much later because I didn't have HBO growing up. And I remember the film. The film is all right. The film has some charm to it. You don't need to know anything about the character. It's a nice little introduction. The digital effects are fucking terrible, but it was the 96 or something, I think Spawn came out. And it's a comic series that I've always assumed that I would love because it's Todd McFarlane's style. I love his artwork that I've seen for Spider-Man. And I picked up a few of the books, and the early books, the original sort of run that I've read, were pretty good. But then I picked up a more modern one where the original Spawn kills, does something to themselves. Not making that mistake again, mentioning that word on stream, and someone else then becomes Spawn, and it was just a bit like, well, what's happening here? Megan 2.0, Megan 1.0, that was pretty good. Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare, talked about earlier on. Pinocchio Unstrung. That could be creepy. Could be terrible. Pooniverse Monsters Assemble. I mean, if it lands on Shudder or if it lands on a streaming service I have access to, maybe I will give it a watch. Maybe. I mean, I've still not watched Whitney the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2. So, and then Popeye the Slayer, man, terrible. Predator Badlands, Return of the Living Dead. So that's TBA for release. Predator Badlands. I did enjoy Prey. And with this one, I believe we are following the Predator as the protagonist. And I have to admit, whilst that is kind of interesting, one of the things that I've never really been that interested in terms of when it comes to Alien versus Predator as a property, in terms of the films, I should say, is that, yes, predators have a code and they have nobility, but in the first two films, they are hunting humans. And I get it, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, or something like that. Don't know, there's a particular saying. But I don't know if I want to follow a predator. Like, not sure. I mean, I have trust in Dan Trachtenberg. I'm sure it will be decent, but not too sure. Saw 11. Okay, so there's nothing really in terms of the detail here for that. Saw 10 was a lot of fun, actually. And I have said that with the Saw franchise, I really dropped off it early on, but doing the rewatch for the Saw episode, which did quite well for the show, it's a pretty good series actually, and it's one of those things where you don't think that binging that series will be healthy because it is just torture, violence, dismembering, and whatnot. The story does connect on one from the next pretty well. I mean, Saw 9, Saw 8. One of the later ones where there's like these laser beams. I didn't really think that one was that good. And Spiral was okay until the ending when it was all like, "Oh, I'm the bad guys." That was a bit shit. Sinners. Now I saw a trailer for this. It looks like it could be pretty interesting. It doesn't really give too much away in the trailer, but I like the look of it. Screenboat, shit. Skyline Warpath. I've seen the first Skyline film. That was enough. Haven't watched any of the sequels. Black Phone 2. I like the Black Phone. I need to see a trailer. I need to see a trailer as to how they're going to continue the story because it just felt like the Black Phone ended pretty definitively. Fran in the chat says Predator novels do a good job of explaining their society. I have to dig them out at some point. Not read any Predator books. The Conjuring Last Rites. I do love the Conjuring series. They're not all bangers, but I like their style of scares. So it's going to be sad to see, but as far as we know for the time being, Vera and Patrick leaving the series. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed what we've seen with the Conjuring series so far. And The Monkey. The Monkey is coming out next month. Yeah, February 21st. Now, this is based on a short story, The Monkey, from Skeleton Crew, I believe. It's a pretty creepy short story. And I am very interested as to what Osgood Perkins is going to do with this because I really, really liked Longlegs. I haven't seen any of his other films. I'm the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House, or The Black Coat's Daughter, or Gretel and Hansel. I never got around to watching Gretel and Hansel, but I was a big fan of Longlegs. I don't think it actually won any of my end of year awards, which, you know, it's just tough. Had some tough competition, but The Monkey. After stumbling upon their father's vintage toy monkey in the attic, twin brothers Hal and Bill witness a string of horrifying deaths unfolding around them. In an attempt to leave the haunting behind, the brothers discard the monkey and pursue separate paths over time. However, when the inexplicable deaths resurface, the brothers are compelled to reconcile and embark on a mission to permanently eliminate the cursed toy. Kind of similar to what happens in the book or in the short story. So Theo James seems to be in a lot of things at the moment. Tatiana Maslany, she's cool from Orphan Black. I said before, I never finished Orphan Black. Elijah Wood, I mean, come on, legend, absolute legend. Colin O'Brien, don't know. Rowan Campbell, oh Rowan, we know Rowan, don't we? We know Rowan as Corey Cunningham from a film that I don't know if I can say the title of. Can we go the whole year without saying that title? Sarah Levi. She was in Schitt's Creek. Okay. There we go. And what else have we got? So Until Dawn, of course, the trailer has dropped for that. That does look pretty interesting. It does seem to be deviating from the story and the characters of the first game. But David F. Sandberg, I like him. He releases under the pseudonym of Pony Smasher on YouTube. Does a lot of great short films. He did Lights Out. He did Annabelle Creation. He's then since did the Shazam films, which I've only seen the first one. It was okay. But I like the setup for this in terms of your actions dictate what happens, but they've done it in a way that it's kind of like Groundhog Day. I think that could be kind of interesting. An untitled Anaconda film with Jack Black and Paul Rudd. I know we did last time. We've obviously talked about fairly recently. And that kind of brings us really to it. I don't know about Wildwood. So that's probably it really for the 2025 preview. So if there are particular films that are in that list so far announced that take your fancy. Be sure to comment on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I believe you can add comments there. What am I looking for on my list? That one. If you want to go to X, Ministry_Horror, you can put your thoughts on the films that you're looking forward to. Discord, we're on Discord, Ministry of Horror. Also, check out TikTok, Ministry of Horror. Check out Instagram, Ministry of Horror. Ministry of Horror pretty much everywhere. Right, Ghouls and Fiends, we're going to stick around on the live stream to do a horror watch along, and also for me to get some snacks, check on the dogs as well. But thank you for listening, watching. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube. Give the shows a view. Give the shows a like. The YouTube channel is kind of dead. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The views have just crap themselves. So maybe we revert back to Twitch. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't cost me anything other than a bit of time to put it onto YouTube, but it is what it is. But yeah, keep listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and wherever else you listen. It really is appreciated. Until next time, Ghouls and Fiends, goodbye.